Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Ruthie Barger, and I'm a real alcoholic. I just wanted to, we had the long form of the second tradition read, and just to let you know that it was an alcoholic that wrote these things, let me tell you that the long form is shorter than the short form. So that's just to let you know that these were alcoholics that wrote these things, okay? We are on page 155, second paragraph down. We're getting into the history, and where Bill and Bob have met. They're at Henrietta Seiberling's house. And John just brought this up to me. I guess we had a flyer back here, the history of the gatehouse. And this is where Bill and Bob met. The gatehouse is out in front of Stan Hewitt Hall. Henrietta Seiberling was married to Harry Seiberling, and Harry Seiberling was a drunk. And Henrietta went to the Oxford group. Henrietta was very good friends with Anne Smith. Anne Smith had persuaded Dr. Bob to go to a meeting with him just that week before. And Dr. Bob had announced to the group that he had a secret. It wasn't really a secret, but he thought it was a secret. And he told him that he was a secret alcoholic and that he would like to have the group pray for him. And that week is when Henrietta Seiberling got the telephone call from Bill Wilson in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel. So you see how this is all coming together. So that was on. So Dr. Bob had his last drink the second time on May 12th of 1935. Dr. Bob was the first AA that had a slip. He got very excited about this plan of one alcoholic helping another alcoholic in order to stay sober. And he thought that, that's the right answer, let's one alcoholic helping another. That's got to be the way to go. And he was so excited about it. So he wanted to go out to Atlantic City. They were having a meeting of doctors out there. And he wanted to present this philosophy to them. But on his way out there, he ended up getting drunk. So he finally got home, and by this time, Bill Wilson had already moved into his house. And so they brought Dr. Bob home, and they sobered him up, and he had his last drink, supposedly, on June 10th, 1935. Now, we have found evidence that this was not Dr. Bob's sobriety date. Whether it is or whether it isn't is really immaterial. We choose to celebrate Founders Day on June 10th, 1935. It may not be Dr. Bob's sobriety date, but it is Founders Day. So every year on the weekend that's around June 10th, up at Akron University, there is a gathering of about 1,500 alcoholics. 15,000. And they go in and they pretty much take over the town. And there's no trouble. There's no crime. There's no fighting. There's no theft. There's no big anything. It's a bunch of alcoholics staying sober and having fun. And on Saturday night, they have a speaker that's out in a football field. And then they have a dance at the jar. And it's just fun. There's meetings going on 24/7. They have, if you're on a budget, you can stay in the dorms. There's hotels there that you can stay in. They even got camping. So, and for where we're at, we can commute. It's only 30 miles. It ain't like we're driving to Pittsburgh or anything, So anyway, this is what goes on. So let's get into the history and see what the book says. Second paragraph down.
A footnote here indicates that this refers to Bill's first visit with Dr. Bob. These men later became co-founders of AA. Bill's story opens the text of this book. Dr. Bob's heads the story section. When our friend related his experience, the man agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. A spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. He told how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business, only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood? He would do anything, he said, but that.
Now, what Dr. Bob was, he was a specialist. And he was a proctologist. And for those that don't know what that is, that's a butt doctor. He met his patients eyeball to asshole. So he knew how to work well with alcoholics.
Being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. For him, this was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw that he would have to face his problems squarely, that God might give him mastery. One morning he took the bull by the horns and set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. He found himself surprisingly well received, and learned that many knew of his drinking. Stepping into his car, he made the rounds of people he had hurt. He trembled as he went about, for this might mean ruin, particularly to a person in his line of business. At midnight, he came home exhausted, but very happy. He has not had a drink since.
Now, this is what we call Founders Day, June 10th, 1935.
As we shall see, he now means a great deal to his community, and the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in full. But life was not easy for the two friends. Plenty of difficulties presented themselves. Both saw that they must keep spiritually active. One day they called up the head nurse of a local hospital. They explained their need and inquired if she had a first-class alcoholic prospect. She replied, "Yes, we've got a corker. He's just beaten up a couple of nurses. Goes off his head completely when he's drinking. But he's a grand chap when he's sober, though he's been in here 8 times in the last 6 months. Understand he was once a well-known lawyer in town, but just now we've got him strapped down tight."
This was in reference to Bill Dodson, AA number 3. The nurse was Mrs. Hall at Akron City Hospital, and Bill Dodson stayed sober, and his sobriety date is June 26th, 1935. And for those that has been to the Akron Intergroup or heard of the man on the bed, the man on the bed is depicted as Bill Dodson.
A footnote here refers to Bill's and Dr. Bob's first visit to AA number 3. See the Pioneer section. This resulted in AA's first group at Akron, Ohio in 1935. Here was a prospect, all right, but by the description, none too promising. The use of spiritual principles in such cases was not so well understood as it is now. But one of the friends said, "Put him in a private room. We'll be down." 2 days later, a future fellow of Alcoholics Anonymous stared glassily at the strangers beside his bed. "Who are you fellows? And why this private room? I was always in the ward before," said one of the visitors. "We're giving you a treatment for alcoholism." Hopelessness was written large on the man's face as he replied, "Oh, but that's no use. Nothing would fix me. I'm a goner. The last 3 times, I got drunk on the way home from here. I'm afraid to go out the door. I can't understand it." For an hour, the two friends told him about their drinking experiences. Over and over, he would say, "That's me. That's me. I drink like that." The man in the bed was told of the acute poisoning from which he suffered, how it deteriorates the body of an alcoholic and warps his mind. There was much talk about the mental state preceding the first drink. "Yes, that's me," said the sick man, "the very image. You fellows know your stuff all right, but I don't see what good it'll do. You fellers are somebody. I was once, but I'm a nobody now. From what you tell me, I know more than ever I can't stop." At this, both the visitors burst into a laugh. Said the future fellow anonymous, "Damn little to laugh about that I can see." The two friends spoke of their spiritual experience and told him about the course of action they carried out. He interrupted, "I used to be strong for the church, but that won't fix it. I've prayed to God on hangover mornings and sworn that I'd never touch another drop, but by 9 o'clock I'd be boiled as an owl." Next day he found the prospect more receptive. He had been thinking it over. "Maybe you're right," he said. "God ought to be able to do anything." Then he added, "He sure didn't do much for me when I was trying to fight this booze racket alone." On the 3rd day, the lawyer gave his life to the care and direction of his Creator and said he was perfectly willing to do anything necessary. His wife came, scarcely daring to be hopeful, though she thought she saw something different about her husband already. He had begun to have a spiritual experience. That afternoon, he put on his clothes and walked from the hospital a free man. He entered a political campaign, making speeches, frequenting men's gathering places of all sorts, often staying up all night. He lost the race by only a narrow margin. But he had found God, and in finding God, had found himself. That was in June 1935. He never drank again. He, too, has become a respected and useful member of his community. He has helped other men recover, and is a power in the church from which he was long absent. So, you see, there were 3 alcoholics in that town who now felt they had to give to others what they had found, or be sunk. After several failures to find others, a 4th turned up. He came through an acquaintance who had heard the good news. He proved to be a devil-may-care young fellow whose parents could not make out whether he wanted to stop drinking or not.
Now, this was Ernie G. Ernie G was AA number 4, and I'm going to give you the inside scoop on this. Dr. Bob's daughter's first husband was Ernie G. Well, Ernie G gets drunk, and Sue got rid of him. And then she married a gentleman by the name of Ray Windows. And they stayed together the rest of their life. But this Ernie G was a devil-may-care chap. And he was Sue Windows, Dr. Bob's daughter's first husband.
They were deeply religious people, much shocked by their son's refusal to have anything to do with the church. He suffered horribly from the sprees, but it seemed as if nothing could be done for him. He consented, however, to go to the hospital, where he occupied the very room recently vacated by the lawyer. He had 3 visitors. After a bit, he said, "The way you fellas put this spiritual stuff makes sense. I'm ready to do business. I guess the old folks were right after all." So 1 more was added to the fellowship. All this time, our friend at the hotel lobby incident remained in that town. He was there 3 months. He now returned home, leaving behind his first acquaintance, the lawyer, and the devil-may-care chap. These men had found something brand new in life. Though they knew they must help other alcoholics if they would remain sober, that motive became secondary. It was transcended by the happiness they found in giving themselves for others. They shared their homes, their slender resources, and gladly devoted their spare hours to fellow sufferers. They were willing, by day or night, to place a new man in the hospital and visit him afterward. They grew in numbers. They experienced a few distressing failures, but in those cases they made an effort to bring the man's family into a spiritual way of living, thus relieving much worry and suffering. A year and 6 months later, these 3 had succeeded with 7 more. Seeing much of each other, scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release, and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart 1 night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. Aside from fellowship and sociability, the prime object was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems. Outsiders became interested. One man and his wife placed their large home at the disposal of this strangely assorted crowd. This couple has since become so fascinated that they have dedicated their home to the work. Many a distracted wife has visited this house to find loving and understanding companionship among women who knew her problem, to hear from the lips of their husbands what had happened to them, to be advised how her own wayward mate might be hospitalized and approached when next he stumbled. Many a man, yet dazed from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Many an alcoholic who entered there came away with an answer.
That man and wife that they were talking about were not members of AA. They were members of the Oxford group. They were not alcoholic. It was T. Henry and Clarence Williams. Now, here's another little coincidence. T. Henry Williams was a CEO of National Rubber Machinery Corporation that Bill Wilson was coming into Akron, Ohio to take over. But it blowed up and never happened. So just, it's a very small world, very, very small world.
He succumbed to that gay crowd inside, who laughed at their own misfortunes and understood his. Impressed by those who visited him at the hospital, he capitulated entirely when later, in an upper room of this house, he heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own. The expression on the faces of the women, that indefinable something in the eyes of the men, the stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place conspired to let him know that here was haven at last. The very practical approach to his problems, the absence of intolerance of any kind, the informality, the genuine democracy, the uncanny understanding which these people had were irresistible. He and his wife would leave elated by the thought of what they could now do for some stricken acquaintance and his family. They knew they had a host of new friends. It seemed they had known these strangers always. They had seen miracles, and one was to come to them. They had visioned the great reality, their loving and all-powerful Creator. Now, this house will hardly accommodate its weekly visitors, for they number 60 or 80 as a rule. Alcoholics are being attracted from far and near. From surrounding towns, families drive long distances to be present. A community 30 miles away has 15 fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Being a large place, we think that someday its fellowship will number many hundreds.
Now, this community that was 30 miles away that they're talking about was Cleveland. And one of our members, Clarence Snyder, was the one that he was coming down to Akron all the time, and he was a used car salesman. And back in the 30s, you could put a lot of people in a car. And what he would do is he would get 2 cars. And he'd bring like 14, 15 people down. And so this is what we're talking about. But I don't even have a number now. But I well over 1,000 meetings a week that we have in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, what that means is that you could go to a meeting every day for almost 3 years and stand up and introduce yourself as being the first time there. And that's something. That's a lot of meetings. But there's a little town like Newton Falls. We ain't even got 4,000 people here. And we got 4 AA meetings here a week. Yeah, and they're full. Okay.
Footnote. This was written in 1939. But life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than attending gatherings and visiting hospitals. Cleaning up old scrapes, helping to settle family differences, explaining the disinherited son to his irate parents, lending money and securing jobs for each other when justified. These are everyday occurrences. No one is too discredited or is sunk too low to be welcomed cordially if he means business.
Now, right there is a dash and a prepositional phrase that's going to give you a lot of leeway. If he means business. Now, if you're here getting your slip signed, if you're here to get the monkey off of your back, if you're here to get your job back, if you are here for any reason other than to get sober and stay sober, I don't have to take your calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to come pick you up at the bars at 2:30 in the morning. Now, if you are here to get sober and stay sober, honey, I am going to do backflips and blow snot bubbles for you. I will do anything in the world to help you. But if you're just pulling my chain, if you don't mean business, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Don't waste my time or yours. You know? And that's just the name of that tune. If you're here to get sober, stay sober, find a new way of life, I will do anything in the world for you. People that are here that has seniority will do it too. But if you're just here trying to pull somebody's chain, if you're here just to get laid, if you're just here to, for some, whatever your reason might be other than, don't waste their time. Don't waste their time. Get out there and get her done. That's what I say. Get her done. And if you live, we'll get you. If you live, we'll get you. I just hope you ain't too mangled. Because this is a hideous disease. Hideous. And it destroys not only you, but everybody you are around. So, if you mean business, you have found heaven right here on earth. And if you don't mean business, just no need wasting your time here. You're here to get your slips on. Get them slipped. You don't even have to stay for the meeting. Don't waste your time or ours.
Social distinctions, petty rivalries, and jealousies, these are laughed out of countenance. Being wrecked in the same vessel, being restored and united under one God, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others. The things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they? Under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many eastern cities. In one of these, there is a well-known hospital for the treatment of alcoholic and drug addiction. 6 years ago, one of our number was a patient there. Many of us have felt for the first time the presence and power of God within its walls. We are greatly indebted to the doctor in attendance there, for he, although it might prejudice his own work, has told us of his belief in ours. Every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients, understanding our work. He can do this with an eye to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. Many of us, former patients, go there to help. Then, in this eastern city, there are informal meetings, such as we have described to you, where you may now see scores of members. There are the same fast friendships. There is the same helpfulness to one another as you find among our Western friends. There is a good bit of travel between East and West, and we foresee a great increase in this helpful interchange. Someday we hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. To some extent, this is already true. Some of us are salesmen and go about. Little clusters of 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities through contact with our 2 larger centers. Those of us who travel drop in as often as we can. This practice enables us to lend a hand, at the same time avoiding certain alluring distractions of the road, about which any traveling man can inform you. A footnote here indicates that this was written in 1939. In 2001, there are over 100,000 groups. There is AA activity in approximately 150 countries, with an estimated membership of over 2 million. Thus we grow, and so can you, though you be but one man with this book in your hand. We believe and hope it contains all you will need to begin.
And that's the end of that CD, and I don't have any more. And it's almost over. So what we're going to do is finish this chapter up next week. Not next week, week after. And then we will do Dr. Bob's Nightmare. So, that's what we're going to do.